What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the South to Central Florida Sports Report. I'm your host, Ken Landis, fan of all South Florida sports and some Central Florida sports as well. A UCF Knights student and avid Panthers, Heat, Marlins, Dolphins fans, all that good stuff. And as you see, we've got an awesome microphone here, courtesy of an Amazon gift card given to me by a family member, so shout out to you who got me this gift card. Don't want to name your name on the air, but you know who you are. So, working to upgrade some of the equipment here. Obviously, the webcam I'm using right now is not the best, but we got this microphone courtesy of an awesome Amazon gift card. So, working to better the equipment here, working to better the show, and we're going to have a great show for you. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and show you what's coming up. We've got some exciting stuff on the show for you. We're going to go ahead and talk about one thing and one thing only today, and that is the playoffs. But it'll be for two teams, the Panthers and the Heat, as both teams are working to get into the playoffs. No matter how low their seed is, but they're looking to make some noise in the playoffs. We'll look at everyone's scenario upcoming. So I'm sure you're wondering, hey Ken, where's the Marlins? Where's the love for the Marlins? Opening days on Thursday and today's Tuesday. Well, I'm planning to try and get a special show in just for a Marlins preview either tomorrow or on Thursday, hopefully by the end of the weekend. So we're going to give the Marlins some love in a little bit, but today we're just going to talk about some playoffs. And to start with the playoff discussion, we're going to talk Florida Panthers. They've still been pretty hot. They lost a bad game to Ottawa recently, and New Jersey still sits a point ahead of them. So we're going to go ahead and see how this thing plays out down the road. I mean, there's nothing else we can do but sit back and watch. The Panthers lost a game in hand, but will regain it tonight because the Panthers don't play, and the Devils and the Blue Jackets and the Flyers all do. So it'll be interesting down the stretch, and it'll be interesting to see how much help we can get. We'll go ahead and look at those scenarios today as well. So let's go ahead and peek at those standings, the wild card, and the division leaders. As promised, here are the standings currently for the Metropolitan, Atlantic, and wild card. And as you see, Florida is really the only contender, the last one to get in right now. And they still have that game in hand and are only a point away. So it just depends on whose schedule is tougher down the stretch. Columbus moved up to the third spot in the Metropolitan, and Philadelphia moved into the wild card. It might stay that way, as we're going to go ahead and take a look at the playoff odds in a second here. But as you see, Tampa Bay and Boston are the first two to clinch from the Atlantic. And here are those playoff odds. So the Columbus Blue Jackets have a really good chance of getting in at 89%. The Devils have a slightly higher chance than the Panthers at 68%. But the red means they do not control their destiny. So if the Panthers were to win out, and so would the Devils, the Panthers would end up making it into the playoffs. And there you see the Flyers at 83%. The reason I leave the Hurricanes in there at the bottom with just under 1% is because they play most of these playoff contenders, and we'll get into that soon as I will predict who will get in and who will not be in. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the predictions for today, at least, or the odds that it will affect the Panthers and their playoff chances. So this one has it at 60% as well. As you see, the victory over the Islanders last night put our chances up 11%. If Carolina would beat New Jersey today, we'd have an extra 8% chance, and then I just have away filled in, so that's how it would affect the rest. But basically, these numbers swing. So we want to root for Philadelphia today, we want to root for Edmonton, we want to root for Detroit. It doesn't really matter, but and obviously we want to root for Carolina. That's the absolute biggest one that we need help with today. So we're going to go ahead and look at the remaining schedules for four teams, and those are the four teams that are all in the playoff hunt for those last couple wildcard spots. And here they are. The Panthers with 8 games left and 85 points. Devils only have 7 left and 86 points. And the Panthers have 2 games in hand over the Devils and the Blue Jackets, who are fighting for that third Metropolitan spot and the first wildcard spot, both with 89 points. So here are the remaining home games and away games. Obviously that makes a difference in, if a team might be able to beat one team or another. So Panthers have a 4-4 split. Devils have a lot of home games left, 5 compared to only their 2 road games, 3-3 for the Flyers, and 2 home games and 4 away games. But the Blue Jackets have some pretty easy away games, if you ask me, maybe Nashville being the toughest. But let's go ahead and predict these records. I think the Panthers will end up going 5-3 in their remaining 8 games. 2 of those losses will come from the hands of Boston, unfortunately, and 1 from Toronto or Nashville. Or maybe we'll beat the Boston Bruins twice and only lose to them once and lose to Nashville. But I think Carolina, Ottawa, and Buffalo are must-win games, so that puts us at 95 points. So now moving on to the Devils, their 5 home games gives them an advantage over a couple teams, but they're going to lose on the road to Montreal and Washington, a bad loss to Montreal, and they're probably going to lose to Pittsburgh or Toronto at home, but I think since they are at home, they can win one of those 2 games. So that puts them at 94 points, so that's what we want to see right now. That would put the Panthers in the playoffs as we stand, and so we'll go ahead and predict the rest of the Flyers schedule, and Boston, Carolina, New York at home, all wins probably, and road possibly all losses. Or maybe we'll give them a loss to the Bruins and win on the road at the Islanders. So 3-3 ends at 95 points as well. And then for the Blue Jackets, they're going to go 4-2. They've got a decently easy schedule of opponents. They would really only maybe lose to Nashville and Pittsburgh. That puts them at 97 points. So that's going to give them the Metropolitan 3rd spot. So the Flyers and the Panthers would be tied for the wild card, both spots, but I believe the tiebreaker would go to the Panthers, as their row numbers currently are the same, and the Panthers won the head-to-head matchups 2-1, both in regulation, or all 3 games didn't go to overtime. So that would give the Panthers the edge there, so they would end up in that first wild card spot. Do I really think this is going to happen? I hope so. I think the Panthers have a decent shot at this. And hopefully my predictions are correct. That kind of was reasonable with it. 3 losses for pretty much each team, and only 2 for the Blue Jackets. So we'll see how this plays out. We'll see if I'm right down the road. And come playoff time, I'll put myself on blast possibly, and or I can brag and say, hey, look, I was right. So the Panthers clearly have a decent shot of getting in at 60% right now. That number will change actually after tonight. So we'll see how it goes. We got to root for a lot of teams to lose, and we got to root for us to win. Obviously, we have to help ourselves out before we can have other people help us out. So Panthers have it in control. They have their own destiny. So if they win out, they're in. But that's not always likely. If they do win out, that'll put them at 101 points with 8 wins, winning out. So, but we're going to move on to the Heat now, from one playoff team to another. The Heat are almost guaranteed to get in. They have 8 games left, and they are 5 games ahead of 9th place, so there's less than a 1% chance that they don't make it in. So thankfully, we're looking at some Heat playoffs coming up, and not sure who they'll face yet, as the 3 through 8 spot are all pretty much wide open. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at those predictions as well. I'm going to go ahead and predict each team's schedule remaining and predict where they're going to finish and who they're going to face in the playoffs. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into that. So here are the current NBA standings as of March 27th, 2018. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the show, but oh well, I forgot. So here, as you see, the Raptors, Celtics, Cavs are all pretty much set up at the top. But the 76ers could end up passing the Cavs here, as the Cavs are only 1 game ahead of the 76ers and a game and a half ahead of the Pacers. And then the 6, 7, and 8 spots are all kind of jostling for position as we speak. But unfortunately, the Heat are at the bottom there with 1 less game remaining, but the same amount of wins as the Bucks, so that's a good sign. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and predict what I think will happen at the end of the season and where these teams will be seated heading into the playoffs. So I think the Celtics will stay up there as well. It'll be very hard for them to change positions at this point. And then the Cavs are at the 3rd spot. I don't think they're going to fall to the 76ers, who I have at 4. The Cavs are just too good. LeBron is just turning it on at the right time. 76ers don't have experience going into this, as they've had a remarkable season after some historically bad ones. And I think the Wizards will actually move up into that 5 spot, as I think the Pacers will fall to 6 with their somewhat difficult schedule down the road. And I'll have the Heat moving up to 7. I think it's doable to pass the Bucks in a 0.5 game behind differential, even though they only have 1 game less than the Bucks. And then obviously the Bucks will come in at number 8. And you know how I love me some playoffstatus.com predictions, so let's go ahead and see what they have in store for these 8 teams, as they have the Raptors with a 90% chance to be at that 1 seed, and the Celtics have a 90% chance to be at that 2 seed. So they have percentages for each seed possible, and I'm putting down the highest one that they have here. So the Cavs have the highest percentage at the number 3 seed with 57%, followed by the 76ers at 48%. The Pacers are at 5. They have the Pacers with a 48% chance to finish in that 5 seed. The Wizards have a 32% chance to stay in their 6 seed. The Heat have a 36% chance to be in the 7th seed, but that red number means that they do not control their destiny. So if both teams were to win out, the Bucks would actually prevail, but as of right now, they have a 64% chance of making the playoffs as an 8th seed. So let's go ahead and just see how I calculated and what their records are going to be at the end of the year, in my opinion, and we'll again see if I'm right or if I'm just dastardly wrong. So I have the Raptors winning 60 games. Yes, 60 games, only losing 22. That's a much improved team from a couple of years ago. So the Celtics are going to go 57-25. They're going to stay 3 games behind the Celtics, or behind the Raptors, pardon me. And then the Cavs will pull within 5 games of the Celtics, but not get to the 2 seed. They'll be at the 3rd seed. The 4 seed, the remarkable 76ers this year, the young 76ers, are going to win 50 games in what has been a phenomenal season compared to years past. The 5th seed is going to be the Washington Wizards at 47-35, but the Pacers will also have that record, so I'm not exactly sure how those tiebreakers work. I don't really remember how. But then the Heat and the Bucks are going to have the same record, so I'm not sure if it's head-to-head or if it's by... I'm guessing it's head-to-head, and I think the Heat have beat the Bucks. So there you have the playoff picture, and I'm going to go ahead and predict round by round. Even though it might not all involve the Heat, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. So the Raptors are going to easily trump the Bucks, I'm sure. If not in 4 games, it'll only be 5. Moving on to the 76ers and Wizards. 76ers go into the playoffs pretty red hot, if you ask me. And they'll beat the Wizards of Washington. Cavs, that's you could Sharpie that one in. That's probably almost a guarantee, whoever they play, as LeBron knows what to do in the playoffs. And the big matchup, I'm going to have to go with the Celtics beating our good old Miami Heat. I just don't know if they have it, especially sputtering down the stretch like they had. If the playoffs started about a month and a half ago, I think we'd be fine. But unfortunately, the Celtics are also red hot, and I think they have a fairly decent shot of beating the Heat. But let's keep going here. So the Raptors, I think, will still beat the 76ers easily, maybe in 6 games, but more likely 5. I think the 76ers might win 1 at home. And in a probably Game 7, I think the Cavs will take their way to the conference championship over the Celtics. And then I do think the Cavs will beat the Raptors. I could have told you this at the beginning of the year because the Cavs just seem to find a way. And let me guess, they'll either play the Warriors or the Rockets. Big surprise there. But so if you want to imagine the Heat going to the playoffs here, or they are in the playoffs, but going all the way to the Eastern Conference Final, they'd have to beat the number 2 seeded Celtics, the number 3 seeded Cavs, and the number 1 seeded Toronto Raptors. So that's a pretty tough task if you ask me, and even if the Heat end up moving up to that 4 or 5 seed, I mean, if you were the Heat, I would say try and get to that 5 seed, but you have nowhere to hide with the Cavs at 3 and the Celtics at 2. And you certainly don't want to drop down to the 8th seed and play the Toronto Raptors, who are very much improved from years past. So there's my Eastern Conference playoff predictions. Cavs going to the finals. I don't know if they'll win. It just depends who they play. I'm doubting it, but we'll see. So there's my NBA predictions for the playoff. So as I mentioned, PlayoffStatus.com does this thing where they can show the percentages for each team for each seed possibility. As you see, the Heat have even a 33% chance to get to the 6th seed and a 36% chance of the 7th seed, but don't control their destiny. And there you also notice the Wizards have a 32% chance at the 6th and 7th seeds. So this is just speculation, but it's always fun to look at numbers. If you ask me, I love looking at numbers. These are cool to look at. So it'll be interesting to see where the Heat do end up seeding out at either 8, 7, maybe 6. I don't know. I really doubt it at this point, but I'm thinking that the Panthers and Heat can make the playoffs and possibly make some noise. It just stinks that the Heat are seated so low and have such tough competition to play at in the first round, if you will, at the next level in the playoffs. But the Panthers and the Heat, they can win out and make the playoffs. They both have 8 games left, and if they win out, they have control. They will be in a good spot. So we'll just have to see what the next couple weeks hold. The last game for the Panthers is the second weekend of April, I believe. I think it's April 8th is the last game, and I'm not sure when the Heat's last game is, but stay tuned. Keep your fingers crossed. Root for other teams that are playing teams ahead of us, and obviously root for your Heat and your Panthers, and they will hopefully make the playoffs. Knock on wood here. So keep your fingers crossed. Keep tuning into those games. The teams both need you right now. I know I'll be tuning in. Want you guys to tune in as well. So that'll be all for this one. Trying to get a Marlins episode out soon with the season starting on Thursday. But that's all for this one, guys. And if you want to stay tuned with current updates, I can't come out with a video every day. I do have a Twitter, my personal Twitter, as well as the show's Twitters. I'll leave the show's Twitter on the scene going away here. And stay tuned on that. Follow me on there. Subscribe to me on this YouTube channel. Would love to have you. Love to have you watch every video I come out with. More great content coming your way as the seasons roll along, and as the season begins for the Miami Marlins. We'll have more videos as well. So thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your time. And go Panthers, go Heat, and as always, go Knights. Charge on.